Let's bring in Mark Hertsgaard, the Executive Director of Covering Climate Now, just to continue this conversation for a moment. Mark, you have covered climate change for decades. So how big of an impact do you think young activists like this have on the movement?
I think that the arising of the youth climate movement around the world, which really dates back to about 2 years ago when Greta Thunberg began her Fridays for Future school strikes every Friday in Stockholm that spread like wildfire around the world. And in September of 2019, that movement put literally 6 million people in the streets around the world demanding action. And I think that that has changed the political dynamics. It has changed how we in the media cover the story. Before that, the media, especially in the United States, sadly, was guilty of climate silence. And the politicians were not much better. And I think now they've seen, with that many people in the streets, that they cannot be silent anymore. They've got to at least look like they're doing something. And of course, also here in the United States, young people like Mr. Foster were instrumental in getting the Democrats victories in Georgia and other states that gave them the 50-50 tie in the United States Senate that the vice president can deliver victories on. So I think that it has tremendously changed the political outlook, both here in the United States and around the world. You even had today at the summit, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson de facto quoting Greta Thunberg and warning his fellow world leaders, if we don't step up right now and really deliver action as opposed to talk, it will just be, as someone said, blah, blah, blah. And that was a reference to what Greta Thunberg said a couple of weeks ago. She was tired of hearing the blah, blah, blah from world leaders who were talking the talk, but not walking the walk on climate.
He also referenced James Bond along with her, saying, it's like a dangerous weapon, that if we don't do something about this mission, it's not going to be good for the future. Very much a creative speech and really bringing it home to younger generation, older generation for sure. What was your reaction, speaking of speeches, to President Biden's speech today and his goal of achieving net zero emissions by 2050? It's a lofty goal.
It is a lofty goal, but it is an absolutely necessary scientific goal. And I would urge viewers, the important thing to watch here over the next 2 weeks, and remember, this summit is not a one-day event. It's going to go on for 2 weeks. And generally, the world leaders don't arrive until the end when the real deals get cut. They've come early this time, I think, partly to try and give some momentum to the next 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens. As your colleague mentioned earlier in the show, we're still waiting to see in Washington how much of President Biden's package will actually pass the Senate. And that, of course, was his difficulty in his speech today, is to talk about how he wants to get to net zero 2050. And that requires, by the way, the next 10 years. I think that was the key point in Joe Biden's speech today. He called the 2020s a decisive decade. And that's because the science is all very clear. If we're going to get to net zero by 2050, which is required to avert this climate catastrophe, what really matters is what happens between now and 2030. We've got to get halfway there in the next 10 years or we're not going to make it. And that really rests on what is going to happen in Congress. And I know a lot of the attention there has been on Joe Manchin of West Virginia, but the real, I think, factor that matters is that the entire Republican Party is in lockstep unanimous opposition to Biden doing this. Wouldn't matter what Joe Manchin thinks if that were not the case. And we're seeing that with a number of the world leaders in Glasgow. Joe Biden is not a king. He's not an emperor. He cannot make the U.S. Congress do what he wants to do. And we're seeing that with other countries, too. So that's a big thing to watch as the next 2 weeks unfold, is what happens in Washington.
Well, we will be paying attention from Glasgow to Washington for the next 2 weeks for sure. Covering Climate Now, Executive Director Mark Hertsgaard. Appreciate your time, Mark. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.